Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Kyle's Corner. Today, I'm joined by a really good friend of mine, Tori from Tori Talks. We've been trying to schedule this for a while, and it took a little bit, but we're finally here. So, Tori, you want to introduce yourself, who you're about, and maybe some of your favorite books are?
Sure. I'm Tori. I run the channel Tori Talks 2, and I'm an author, reviewer of fantasy and a smattering of other things. What else? My favorite books. Red Rising is my favorite series of all time. Then Malazan, Lies of Lamora, Mortal Techniques by Rob J. Hayes. Recently discovered Juliette Marillier, and I've read one book by her, and I can already see her becoming a favorite author in the future. Yeah. That's the
awesome
lowdown.
So pitch me Daughter of the Forest, because I hear really good things about it, but I don't really know anything about what the book entails.
So Daughter of the Forest is like a historical fairy tale fantasy. It's very ethereal, very beautifully written, very deep character POV. We follow Sorsha, who is a young girl with a big group of older brothers, and they're very close-knit. And then a sorceress does something horrible to their family, and Sorsha is the only one who can reverse the curse. And it is really, really well done. It convinced me that I do actually like fairy tale style fantasy, which I didn't know until I read that book. And it's really, really good.
Awesome. Yeah. The thing that scares me is I hear mixed things about the sequels. So
yeah, I haven't read those yet. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But Daughter of the Forest is also a standalone, technically speaking.
That's good to know.
So you could read that and then stop.
I feel like that's always a benefit. Like the same with Gentleman Bastards, is it's tricky to get people into that series. But I'm like, but it is a series, but technically, like each book is its own thing. So
right.
But people hear series and they just kind of freeze up.
But it's so worth it.
I know. Yeah. Martin has conditioned everybody. Hey, Derek. Hey, Pete. Hey, Rogue.
You know what's funny about that, though, is I feel like most people who, like pretty much anybody I've ever talked to who has read Song of Ice and Fire wasn't like, man, I'm so bummed that I read the ones that are out.
Yeah.
Usually they really enjoy it.
It's interesting to me because so I'm in all of the Reddits, I'm in Westeros, or all of the stuff. And it's interesting because people, the way they discuss it is super bifurcated, where they'll be like, oh, like Martin taught me to never trust an unfinished series, but then they'll be like, oh, but I love this series no matter what. I would. So it's like they have this I accept that this has happened and I wouldn't change it for the world, but also I don't want it to happen again. Like it's just interesting that people think that way. And I'm like, I know Martin didn't intend for that to be how his impact on the genre was, but it for sure had an effect, especially Rothfuss and stuff. And
I mean, even looking at like Lies of Lamora being, hey Matt, one of my favorite series of all time. Of course, I would love more of it. Like if and when he releases Thorn of Emberlane, everything on my TBR gets thrown out the window immediately.
Yeah.
I don't care. But if all I ever get are the 3 books that are out, I love them. I had a great time with them, and I can't wait to reread them. So like, I haven't lost anything really.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I don't really understand the inverse because, like, I get wanting more, but it never changes the experience that you had in the books in the first place. So it's just never been something that's bothered me one way or the other. But the funny thing is, yesterday, like, we had a bunch of people over, and of all the people over, like, one of the people liked Lord of the Rings, and then that was it. And then the other person is just kind of a vague fantasy fan. So there's like 10 people over, and the vague fantasy fan is like, oh, have you ever heard of Name of the Wind? And I was like, yeah, like I've read it, it's good. And she's like, yeah, like I read those books a few years ago and I loved them. But he's never going to release the 3rd book, is he? And I was like, yeah, like, probably not. And then everybody was like, well, what about George R. Martin? And I was like, do not get me started on this. We're having a good time.
Hold on.
And so I just had to explain to like a room of non-nerds, like the Patrick Rothfuss, Scott Lynch, and George R. Martin situations and how they're different. And I just felt so nerdy.
It's like a reality check when we leave the bubble, the nerd bubble that we're all in, and we're like, oh yeah, this is what normal people think about.
Yeah. It's funny. You're not a big Rothfuss fan?
I don't know that I can say that because I haven't read any of his books.
Oh, really? Okay.
Nope, I have not read Name of the Wind. How to put this diplomatically? I have not been a fan of
the way that he acts.
Yes.
Oh, I don't have to put it diplomatically. I have big problems with how he's done.
This was even before I got onto BookTube. Seriously, I used to watch a lot of like Comic-Con panels and that kind of stuff with a lot of different authors. And like at that time, I didn't know who he was, hadn't read any of the books, didn't know anybody that really read him or anything. And even back then, I was like, I don't know that I want to read this guy's books. So it's been one of those things where it's like, it's a big classic of the genre, and I can really appreciate why a lot of people love the story, but I don't know that's something I'll ever read.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I read the first book and I really liked it, but I feel like I mainly liked it for the prose, which is what people say.
Sure. Yeah.
But I listened to it on audio and I just was like transported. Like I think the way he makes sentences is like beautiful. So like I was just kind of, but normally when I like a book, like, so I gave it 5 stars. And generally speaking, if I listen to a book on audio and I give it 5 stars, I usually remember quite a bit about it because it's telling me that like it really stuck out to me. I remember almost nothing about Name of the Wind, like maybe like some character names and like some very big events. But to me, it was just, I just was like spellbound by the prose, which when people tell me they don't really like the plot of it, I'm like, yeah, that's fair. It's pretty basic. But I never read the second one because I hear very mixed things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Rothfuss, not a dude for me.
Yeah, me neither.
And people like put him in the same pedestal as like Lynch and Martin, and I just think they're way different. And I'm sad that they get pushed together that way.
Yeah, one of my kind of a funny story along that line is one of my favorite Comic-Con panels I've ever watched, and I have to go back and find it now. But there was one where Rothfuss was on a panel with Erikson. It's like one of the few Comic-Con panels I've ever seen Erikson do. And it was really funny because Erikson didn't say much during the panel, but whenever he did talk, everyone at the table just, you could have heard a pin drop. Like they were all like, oh my gosh, he's going to say something now, you know? And then like Rothfuss would try to piggyback on whatever Erikson was saying. And every time it was just, it ended up being like, yeah, but that's what he just said. And he said it better. You know, like it was
strikes
interesting.
Me as that way, but no, that is interesting. Erikson also, the way he talks, he kind of personifies the whole thing where it's like you talk quieter. Like I don't think he talks quiet, but he talks low key, and like people have to like lean in to listen to him because he has all this like wisdom and knowledge to drop. And Rothfuss kind of just is like me, where he just talks all the time. So.
I would much rather talk to you than Rothfuss.
Well, thank you. That is a high compliment. Have you ever been to like a Comic-Con of any sort? Or any,
no,
like,
next year I'm going to go
gathering?
for I'm so excited. Next year I'm going for the first time.
So which one? Like big one?
I'm going to be at Worldcon in Seattle. And then nice. I'm also going to be at I can't remember the name of it, but it's the big one in Denver.
Nice. That's a big one too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm actually going to take books there, so I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to Dragonsteel this year, and I would really like to go to Worldcon. You know what I found out? So there was this whole controversy with Worldcon, and when it was going to China, like so all the stuff came out that when it was in China, the votes were weird. Where like when they voted how many years ago, 2017, 2018, to where they would hold the 2023 one, it was China and Winnipeg, and Winnipeg was like winning, and then all these like random votes came in for China at the end. And I'm so, I mean, I'm obviously sad for all the reasons, like what happened to the authors. That's a way bigger deal that affected all the authors, right? But just from a fan perspective, Winnipeg is 2 hours from me. And I'm like, that'll like George R. Martin would have probably come. And I'm like, oh man, like I'm just so sad. But maybe someday it'll come back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been put in the hat already. So that's a good sign that maybe they'll revisit that.
Yeah. I think it being like the home place of Erikson and Guy Gabriel Kay and all that gives it a little bit more fantasy prestige than it would otherwise. Hey, Derry, how's it going? I haven't talked to you in a little bit. I miss talking to you. I need all of your hob takes and stuff.
Derry is hand-holding me through the events of the rest of the live ship traders through notes.
Are you going to continue, do you think?
With the Realm of the Elderlings, yes. With live ship, I don't know. At this point, I've put it down for the foreseeable future, but it's not to say I'll never read it.
Right.
But at this moment, I'm not reading it.
That's fair. And like, there's so many things where people just want other people to read the series they love because they love them. Mm-hmm. So like, I mean, my instinct would be like, Tori, keep reading. But like the ways that you told me, I'm like, I just don't think, like, I just think it's going to get worse, not better for you. So
well, it's like serious when, because, on BookTube, we have our friend groups and we all talk about books and we, constantly getting recommendations and, I don't think you'll like that and blah, blah, blah. But when I posted my Ship of Magic video, I was getting so many DMs and Boxer messages from people that I'm really close to who are like genuinely concerned about me reading the rest of this. And it was like it was a very different, it was just a different response than I've ever had to my opinion on a book before. And they were wonderful about it. Derry was great. Everybody was really great about it. And yeah, so I mean, I'm taking that seriously because I have built a network of friends here that I trust. And so like your comment and Jimmy's comment and, Wizard DM'd me and like Derry's been great. So I just feel like, yeah, I trust you guys.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many books out there that you're going to like. And it makes me sad that was your reaction to Ship of Magic, but I don't think any of us could have foreseen that. Even you didn't.
I had no idea. Yeah.
You know what? Tawny Man is great. So
I just bought the UK versions of Tawny Man. And the thing was, like, I can still recognize that Hobb is a great writer from the book. It's not like, my opinion of the content isn't necessarily reflective of who she is as an author. So
yeah. So it's just, some books are hard. It's just not anything to do with that. Hey, Brian, how's it going? Nice to see you.
My fellow Minnesota booktuber.
Yeah, we all need to have a gathering.
Yeah.
I used to go to Minnesota all the time, and then the pandemic hit, and I haven't been down since.
That's fair. I've never been to Canada, but I hope to.
Oh, we're right there.
I know. It's like right there. I've been very close.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, the States is so funny to me because I have a friend who lives in Minneapolis, and we used to go to concerts together all the time. And so I would come the 8 hours to Minneapolis, and like often, like 3 to 6 times a year, depending on what's going on, right? And then there was a concert we wanted to go to in Fargo, and I was like, hey, like these guys are coming to Fargo, and he, like, dead serious, was like, I don't know, man, that's like a 3-hour drive. It's like that's really far. And I was like, dude, what do you think I do? I come 8 hours. He's like, yeah, but you're Canadian. You do that all the time. And I'm like, I don't know. I think 3 hours is not
It's still 8 hours of driving, no matter where you're from. Yeah.
But it's because in Canada, like, everything's so far from each other. So like you have to drive. Like, I find people who live in Brandon where I am, and they drive 2 hours to Winnipeg just to go shopping. Yeah. Because yeah, it's just,
I mean, I live in rural Minnesota, and it is funny because a lot of my friends that live in the city, they're like, you drive 45 minutes to church. I'm like, yep, it's
wow, that's crazy.
Like, I don't know, to me it's, but I've always lived in the middle of nowhere. So like, I don't see it as weird at all.
Yeah. It's just funny. So one series that I wanted to talk to you about is Rob J. Hayes' Mortal Techniques, which I'm glad you mentioned is one of your favorites. I don't know anybody that talks about the series as much as you, and I think it's so slept on. Like, it's really good.
Yes. Agree.
and now I've been hearing good things about his new trilogy of trilogies, but I'm just like, you're gonna write 9 new books and then the sequels to those books, Rob, and I don't get more Mortal Techniques,
right? And he's such a tease too, because he even put out there that he has a 4th book for that series in the works, and I'm like, okay, can we have it?
Yeah. Did you back that Kickstarter?
No, I did not. Partially because I'm trying really, really hard not to spend a ton of money because I have to buy book covers and things. But I have such a backlog of Rob J. Hayes books already that I was like, I need to read some things.
The only things I've ever read from him is the Mortal Techniques. So by the time I catch up, he'll have finished this trilogy of trilogies, and then I can just read them on ebook or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which one is your favorite of the 3? Do you think?
Spirits of Vengeance.
Yeah, me too.
Hands down.
It is. Spirits of Vengeance is one of the best fantasy books I've read, and I feel like but the people that I know have read it have all pretty much universally loved it. But then,
Yeah.
like, I know like 6 people that have read it. And I'm like, man,
Yeah.
this is just such a good book. Like,
I know. It's well, and the thing is, I don't know, did you grow up watching anime?
not really. Like, a
Okay.
little. I'm actually rewatching Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, and it's putting me in
Nice.
the anime headspace. But like, I dipped my toe in, but I wasn't like a big fan.
Yu-Gi-Oh was my gateway.
Oh yeah, nice.
I went back and rewatched the first couple episodes of it a couple months ago, and I was like, "Oof!" I love it, but it's so cringy.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It's so bad. I love it.
The thing is, if you can hold your nostalgia and the ridiculousness together, it's so good. Because like my wife did not play it or watch it, so she'll watch like I'll be watching an episode, and I'll have to explain like the dumbass shit they're doing to her, and then she'll just make fun of it with me. Like she'll be like, did you know that Pot of Greed allows them to draw 2 cards? Because they mention that in literally every episode. It's like, do you think the people watching this show don't know what this does yet? It's just silly. But anyway, go on what you were saying about anime.
Yeah, I think like for any of us that grew up kind of in that era of, you know, the shonen anime and the Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards and all that kind of stuff. And like this is like candy for there it is. Candy for adults. Like it gave me so much of the same storytelling and nostalgia vibes that I had, you know, from watching shonen anime and all of that kind of stuff, but it's just leveled up in such an awesome way for adult fantasy. The magic combat, I thought it was super fresh and unique the way he writes it. And Spirits was my favorite because that was the book that like made me realize how much I loved the series as a whole. And the Easter eggs in that book, once you've read Never Die and Pawn's Gambit, were just so good. I actually got really emotional at one of them.
Yeah. It did like the standalones, but that are connected, and I think the best way I've ever seen. Like if you think of like First Law is like the standard of that, and I think First Law did it like well too. But I truly think each of those 3 books are standalone books, but you get more having read each of the other 2. So like you don't have to by any means, but like the little Easter eggs to the first 2 books that are in Spirits of Vengeance are so much more powerful if you've read 100%. Those books. Yeah,
100%. And that's why I recommend that people like still read them in order, even though you don't have to, just because I think the payoff is so much more when you've read the other 2 first. But yeah, I loved Spirits of Vengeance so much. That's my favorite indie book.
You like it more than Sword of Kaigen, really? I guess so. Yeah.
Well, here's why. And I love Sword of Kaigen, so don't get me wrong. And without spoilers for the chat, there's kind of 2 stories in Sword of Kaigen. One sucks. The other one is like one of the best things I've ever read. Like it's the weirdest.
I consistently say that Sword of Kaigen is the best and worst of what self-published is, because if she had gone through the traditional publishing channels, they would have been like, take out X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And X and Y would have been things that she actually probably should have cut. But then Z would have been like a thing that makes it really special. So it's like you're allowed to experiment with structure and with the types of main characters and the way you're coming at a story in a way that can be so provocative and like thought-provoking and impactful. But you also just like make up your own time units for no reason. And I'm like, I'm sorry, day 1 editor is going to tell you cut that shit. And it's just so annoying to me because I'm like, oh, if you just like 5% things, it would just be an all-time. Like, I mean, it's still an all-time.
It's still like it's amazing to me how incredibly impactful that book is. And that's why like I recommend it as one of my favorites, because it's like even with that, it doesn't matter. It's amazing. Like the big emotional impact moments are going to like lay you out.
Yeah.
Like, so good.
Totally agree. Oh, what I was saying before we talked about Sword of Kaigen was no. Yeah, I love it. I always want to talk about Sword of Kaigen. Is that when I read Never Die, I really liked it, and I was like, I feel like this is influenced by Dynasty Warriors, and I don't normally feel that way. And then I like read an interview with Rob J. Hayes, and he was just like, yeah, like I just really wanted to do like a thing like Dynasty Warriors, and I was like, yeah, I knew it. And it's funny because you've never played Dynasty Warriors, but another series that you really liked was the Heroes of Chaos series by Baptiste, or What is the name of the series?
Yeah.
With the Yellow Sky Revolt.
Three Kingdoms Chronicles.
Three Kingdoms Chronicles. Yeah.
Those. Yep.
And yeah, so Baptiste went the historical fiction route.
Yep.
And Rob J. Hayes went the fantasy route. But
Rob was like, let me sprinkle a little bit in there, and the rest of it's just going to be wild and crazy and awesome.
Yeah. LPQ. That is a great series, guys. Matt, where are you in that series? I didn't even know you started it.
I'm trying to remember how many of those he's read. LPQ is, in my opinion, the best written, underrated fantasy series of our time. After having read of the ones I have read.
I'm going to turn my mic down a little bit. And Ethan, do you want to tell me how
is it me or Kyle that's too loud?
I've had a lot of coffee today because I've had a hectic day, so I might just be wilding out. So I apologize if I'm wild.
I'm slightly sick, so I'm overcompensating for that in energy. So that also might be a problem.
Yeah. I really like the first book. Like, I know people say, like, oh, get through the first book. And I didn't have that feeling at all. I love the first one. I actually think
do too.
If I was to reread, there's a chance I might like the first book the most. Like,
how would you rank them?
It's really difficult for me. I like 2 a lot more than other people do. And
so
I like
do
3.
I. Yes.
I like 3 less than other people. Like, again, I think all of them are good. So it's not like I'm saying 3 is suddenly not good. But like when you talk to Alan's like, oh, if you hit book 3, then it's amazing. And I'm like,
book 1 and 2 are amazing.
I think my rating might be 2, 3, 1, 4, maybe. I would have to really do a reread and think about it, because 4 I really liked, but the central conflict of the 4th one relied on a little bit too much convenience, or like people not talk. I can't really talk about it with spoilers, but there was like a major aspect of the last book that I thought was a little silly, especially with like how grounded and realistic he made the characters' thoughts and motivations before. But it's still an excellent book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not loud enough. Interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's just different people's opinions on how loud I am, but okay. I'll try to. I've only used this mic for 2 streams, so I'm still working out the kinks.
It surprises me that a lot of people would put 2 as their least favorite, because 2 is my favorite of the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's either my favorite or tied for my favorite.
Yeah, I think
I really like 2.
I think I would go 2, 1, 4, 3 would be my ranking. 3 was actually my
list. 3 is your least favorite?
I think I have an explanation for that. I liked, and this is, I gave all of them. Did I give them all 5 stars? I think I did. So it's not like I didn't like any of them, but I'm such a military fantasy geek. So when he takes that very slow burn, like character focused, not action based style, which I loved in the other 3 books, into a military setting, and then, I could have used a little bit more.
So
tension.
Like the lack of military in the other books made the military in the 3rd book not as good.
Yeah.
I kind of get what you're saying. I get what you're saying there. Have you read any of other Abraham, or is that
not yet?
First?
Not yet.
Yeah, me too. I've read Age of Ash, which I DNF'd.
Okay.
But then I listened to the audiobook, and I knew it was a slower book, and I didn't like the main character, and the audiobook narration was just not good. So then I was like, I will come back to this book later. And the premise of the Kithamar trilogy is that it's the same period of time from different perspectives.
That's what I heard.
So I just knew I would try the 2nd book and see how I felt about that one. And I really liked Blade of Dream.
Nice.
I thought it was really good. So now when the 3rd book comes out, I think I'm just going to reread them all at the same time. Because Abraham's a really good prose writer and really good characters.
I'm actually really excited to try The Expanse too, to be honest. I have Dagger and Coin too.
Yeah. Dagger and Coin I'm excited for.
I mean, I'm trying. I'm reading as fast as I can.
What are you on? Did you finish Dead House Gates?
No. I'm still in it. See, here's the thing. So this last couple of months, I took a break off of YouTube for a little bit for mental health reasons. And then I came back, and I've kind of I had a slump for a while. I've been kind of getting back in. And then in May, I actually vlogged 2 of my reads, Iron Gold and The Hobbit. And vlogging, I love. I really enjoy it, but it is a completely different reading experience, and it really slows down everything. And coming off of vlogging and trying to go into like a really chunky, dense book after that is really hard for me. So I am like a third of the way through Dead House Gates. And in June, I'm hoping to pick it back up and actually get through it. But it was at a point where I was like, I know that my brain is just not focused enough for this right now. So
yeah. And especially with rereads, it's just like a different experience. Like I reread Oathbringer, and Oathbringer is the one I remember having pacing problems.
I was going to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so, well, no, I still love it. Like the first time, so I can't remember what author it was, but there was an author who said like, love for a series love for a book comes after you've slaked the lust of the plot or something like that, where it's like after you know how the story goes, the second time through is where you really like fall in love with the story, which I totally can agree with. But the first time through Oathbringer, even though the pacing was janky, I could just like power through because I wanted to know what was going to happen. The second time through, I hit like part 2 where everything just like really slows down. And I was like, I know what's going to happen, so I'm just going to take it slow. So I just like put it down for a little bit and came back, and then I eventually finished it. And it's still a great book, but the pacing issues made itself way more apparent on a reread. But when you're rereading, I feel like you're reading it for a different reason than the first 100%. Time. So you can take your time, you can set it down, like it's totally there for you whenever you need. And that's your favorite book of all time, right?
Dead House, yes. Up to this point. And I'm kind of one of the reasons that the reread is taking me longer too is because I'm curious to see if it stays that way. I don't anticipate it not, but I've read a lot of books since then. And the thing is, like when I first started Dead House Gates years and years and years ago, and I've talked about this on my channel a lot, it was a very important book for me to read at the time that I read it. And I connected very heavily with a certain character that everybody hates in Malazan. And now, like being on a completely different phase of my life and my healing journey and all of that kind of stuff, like you said, it's a completely different read. Like I'm reading her character from a completely different lens, and I'm looking at like, it's just a completely different book in some ways, and I'm still loving it, but. Mm-hmm.
Anitha, I finished House of Chains, and I got to read Midnight Tides soon-ish, hopefully. So that character, I also hate, but I don't hate you, so that's good.
I appreciate that.
But the thing, I don't know if we're specifically not saying the character just to like for expectations, but the thing that is bothersome about the character is that there's so much dialogue that I'm not like. These books have been around for a long time. People have been talking about it for a while. Erickson famously like took a step back from YouTube over arguments involving this character.
Yep.
And so for me to step in after just reading Dead House Gates with my own, not anything, and I'm like, I don't like this character. And then everybody comes in, but like they're responding to all the arguments that everybody's had before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not stale. Like people were really trying to like mental illness explained to me about, and I'm like, I know all, like, I don't like, there's really admirable aspects to that character. Like, I don't think she's poorly written.
Right.
I just like fundamentally dislike her, but that doesn't mean that like the reason she's in the story is not like incredibly important. So like, I'm just kind of in the middle ground where like, I would prefer to read about this character less, but also I get what he's going for. And everybody on both sides is screaming at me for it. And I'm like,
of course.
Just not everything's in the same line of discourse.
This is what bothers me sometimes about, I think, and I won't go into it too far because it could be a long conversation, but like the thing about her character that's bothers me is I understand people that dislike her. I don't like her.
Right. Yeah.
Like I get it. I understand her. I completely understand her. And I think that she has her character says a lot of really important things about how we perceive trauma and all of that. So, but when people are like, I dislike this character, I get it. Like she's not particularly likable.
Yeah. And like, if I was to have a criticism of like the way she's written, it's not even the way she's written. It's that, I think the better way to have done that would have been to have more of the pre-time. And I think people like to, and again, when I say people, I don't mean everybody. Like I know you and Jimmy, lots of these people are very reasonable, but in the ethosphere of people talking, if you criticize the way Erickson does something, people get really mad. And I'm like, I think it's reasonable to say we saw too much of the after and not enough of the before for a lot of people to have more sympathy and compassion for that character. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, there's like a disconnect with the way she's acting and the way the reader perceives her a lot of times.
Yeah. I do think that that's like to some degree a realism of, because we often meet people at different points in what their, you know, lives have, what their experiences are. But
yeah,
the other thing that I think with that is, and especially since you've read House of Chains, the arc between, for multiple things, but specifically between those two books, was what really made me say, wow, look, like I'm incredibly impressed with how this full arc looks. And I think in a way we get some of the before
later
in
on.
this, and you get a glimpse back into, you know, the past that way.
Yeah, and I would have to listen to some talks or some conversations about House of Chains, because I was slogging my way through House of Chains. It was by far my least favorite of the four. And that's not to say there aren't good things in it. I like some characters. There's some good moments. But for the most part, I felt like a lot of that book is just people being like, one day I'll do this, and then they don't do that. Like there's a lot.
There's a reason part of the reason I stopped after House of Chains is because that was a long book to get through. Yeah,
so I just think that I haven't really given enough consideration of how that recontextualizes people for me. Yeah, I probably will as I get back into the series and like get the neurons firing. But anything that gets people like really excited about like relating to a character or relating to a piece of literature, I think is really positive, and we should not downgrade that just because the character is unlikable. Like I think she's really well done for the reasons that
I agree.
So I'm just trying to catch up in the chat at the same time.
We are spoiler skirting champions, by the way, at the moment.
Yeah, most people just say the name. I don't know, but now we've gone so far, it's like we're just whatever. We're just hitting it.
Whoever we're talking about.
Yeah. Character introduced on page 1 of the second
X.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that some people really liked House of Chains. But also, part of the reason I was reading it is that Bookborn and I were doing a buddy read, and people have said that she will probably not like the 4th book, and it's not like she was like super in love with the first 3. Like there were things she really liked and things she didn't, and she wanted to take a really long break from in between book 3 and 4.
That's fair.
And I was like, I'm okay with going at pace. Like I don't need to binge this series, but what will suck is if, say, we take like 6 months off and then we start House of Chains and then you just DNF the series because you don't like House of Chains. Right. And then I'm going on by myself anyway. So I was like, how about I read House of Chains and I give you what I think your opinion might be on it, and like whether or not you should take a break or like, you skip parts or something. She's like, sounds good. And I read House of Chains, and let me tell you, I do not think she will like that book. I think that is DNF City for Bookborn. And I told her that. I was like, it's up to you. I personally think parts 1, 4, and 5 of that book are going to be difficult for you. So like, I don't really recommend it. So then she was like, okay, I'm probably going to put it on pause for a while. So then in that case, I just finished the book. So when I was reading it, I was really in the mindset of like trying to recommend to my friend whether or not. Yeah. So it just wasn't the best reading experience. Yeah. I don't hold that against the book too much.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting through. A part of me, like, I could have just started up with Midnight Tides, I think, but I really wanted to reread the books again just because I feel like I'm going to put more things. Yeah. And I'm going to put more things together than I did. I mean, when I was, 2021 and read them for the first time, I had the only adult epic fantasy I'd read beyond that was Mistborn and Karen Miller's Hammer of God trilogy. And going from that to Malazan, I had no idea what was going on. I liked the characters and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And that was about the extent. But I'm excited now with the breadth of like experience that I have in reading adult fantasy now. Like I reread Gardens of the Moon and I was like, I am way less confused by this than I was the first time around. And I couldn't remember most of it. So it was kind of like reading it again for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, I did the same thing with Grace of Kings. It's really interesting. I highly recommend anybody who reads a lot of fantasy now to go back and read the first fantasy book you thought was difficult, because it really puts it in context. the first time I read Grace of Kings, the reason I read it is because I really like Chinese history, and it was based on Chinese history. And I didn't really read fantasy. I just read like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and A Song of Ice and Fire. And the beginning of that book is so like, in the context of me reading it, 2015, was so confusing because he would like follow a character for like 50 pages, and then you wouldn't hear from him again, and then you introduce another character for 30 pages, and then just randomly kill them off. And he was just doing all this like wide world building. And I was like, who even are the main characters of this book?
You're right.
And I kept turning to my wife and being like, I think I hate this book. And she's like, well, then stop reading it. I'm like, I know, but like, it's just so interesting.
But what if it's good?
And then I got to the end of the book, and I was like, I think that's one of my favorite books of all time. And then I never continued on to read. And then like finally Veiled Throne was coming out. I was like, I should do a reread and then continue on with the series. And when I reread Grace of Kings, I was like, this is way easier to read.
Yeah.
Like, it was so clear to me who the main characters were. I could keep everybody straight. And I was like, oh, it's just all about your experience in reading.
Right. 100%. I mean, I even have said that about LPQ so many times. Long Price Quartet for anyone in the chat. I said that the other day on a live stream, and people were like, what is LPQ? Yeah. I know most of our chat knows what it is, but I know 100% 5 years ago, I would have DNF'd that easily.
Yeah.
Easily. And it's now one of my, I'm actually sitting here doing one of those like top 10 fantasy series of all time things and trying to figure out what I would, how on earth I'm going to rank them all. And it's easily going to be in my top 5. Easily. And it's so funny looking back and being like, I can't imagine handing this to myself 5-6 years ago. I'd been like, what is this? I can't. So slow.
See, I know that I've changed in how I read, but I actually, that tends to be the way people, like, they'll start with faster paced books. And then as they read more, they're more okay with slower paced books. I think for me, it was more like high fantasy. Like, I would not have read a high fantasy book with the same level. Like, it's not like I would have turned my nose up at it, but I would have just been like, oh, there's just all these like random elements that I don't get.
All these names.
Put something down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I was always good with names. Like, I mean, I read Lord of the Rings when I was like 11. I read Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which has like 7,000 named characters. So like names have always been fine to me. It's actually a draw to have more main characters. Because a lot of times people will like if you have like a fantasy book, they'll have like 7 named people. And I'm just like, you'll have the thoughts of that person. And it actually kind of drives me crazy that they don't know the names of the people around them.
Yep.
And like outside of, I understand the author just doesn't want to bog you down in names. I understand that. But like you always get like the POV of like a commander, and then like all of his troops will be killed. And he's not like Charles died. Like he knows all these people. But
he's like, oh, we lost 15 people.
Yeah. But those are 15 people he should know. So like the more lived in the world feels, like A Song of Ice and Fire or like Stormlight or any big like Malazan. Like one of the best thing about Malazan to me is how much the bridge burners feel like a unit of people that like really care about each other. And like even like in the first book, you have, they get like 2 lines, like a bridge burner, and then in like book 4, they're like really important.
Right.
And I'm like, I just love that because it's just how it feels more realistic to me, I guess.
Yeah.
Shut up, Matt. Matt is always making fun of me for looking young.
Sorry, I get the same. I have the same problem.
Yeah.
When people don't know me very well and they find out that I have 3 kids and my oldest is almost 12, they're like, "What?" It's like, I know.
Your age did surprise me. I thought you were significantly younger.
I am 33 now. Yeah.
Oh. I thought you were like 25. So.
Nope. Brian, you already know who my least favorite wizard is.
I'm trying to.
It's a popular fantasy trilogy that I did not like.
Okay, yeah, okay. It's so difficult to not say the name of that. We should get gold medals for just not spoiling things.
You know what I
mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say the trilogy because it doesn't really matter. But yeah, First Law was a big disappointment for me.
And you haven't continued on yet, right?
Mm-mm. I do plan to read the standalones at some point, but as I've told other people before, at this moment, I'm kind of frustrated with Abercrombie and he's in timeout. So
I think, for the record, your drama, that book was great, but opinions or whatever.
I know.
Best Served Cold is interesting because I think you will either really love it or have the same problems with it that, like, for instance, Bookborn does, which everybody's like, oh, like, that's where, like, you know, his female characters really shine. It's like a female-centric, action-paced book. And then she's like, oh, yeah, like, the female characters are kind of fine. But then other people actually do feel that way. Like, oh, this is actually way more my jam.
Yeah.
But I think you will love the heroes. I'm pretty confident the heroes will be the one you really like.
Well, that was like my favorite thing about the original trilogy was the Northmen, hands down. Wasn't even, I mean, you know, a ragged motley crew, you know, it's not really a stretch, but.
Listen, Anita, let me explain something to you. I yelled at you through text, which is not actually yelling at you. If Tori and I were talking on Discord, I would be like, how dare you? And it would come off really negative. But I'm way more reasonable when I'm talking. And
I would just respond in all caps.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? Like, I hate him. Yeah. That's what I've been hearing. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I don't think you'll hate the rest, but I do think the heroes will be yelling at Anita is fun. Yeah.
Sal, I'm actually a vampire, not a time traveler.
What I was going to say earlier, let me go. So Derry's reading The Spear Cuts Through Water, and I'm also reading that right now. Is that on your radar or something that you're going to read?
So far, I have, and this will be the end of it because now people will tell her, but I have so far escaped Evie's conversion campaign. And I don't know if that's intention. It might be because I don't know that I'm going to love it. I haven't read it. I've heard it's amazing.
I'm taking it 10 pages at a time, actually.
Yeah.
I originally, so like I did like a 5-star TBR month, and that was on this month's TBR. And I started a bunch of books just to see which ones were more confident we're going to be. And then, like, actually, I do think the way Spear's going, it could easily still be a 5-star read, but it's just like more challenging than I was expecting. Yeah. So I was like, I'll just read it slowly. Like, I don't want to conform it to like reading it in May and then hurt my experience, but it is a very confusing book, like extremely confusing.
Yeah. And I do struggle, especially because, and I feel like I'm, everybody get your bingo cards out, but I'm going to mention my ADHD again. So my struggle to sequentially process also extends to reading. So when you have a book where there's a lot of like weird timelines and weird like things happening within things.
You should read this book.
I really struggle with that because I get to the end of it and I literally cannot process through like, okay, so if I'm going to put that all in order, like I can't really do that.
So you're gonna have a lot of issues with this book.
This is why I hated Gene Wolfe. That's why I hated Gene Wolfe.
Oh, I didn't know you hated Gene Wolfe. That's crazy. You're the only.
He's one of the only authors I will openly say that, not him as a person, but his work. Hate it. Him and Sarah J. Maas. So just getting both ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, you're like, most people are like on the one side basic, one side complex. You're like, I like all of it in the middle.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, I feel like I'm actually quite proud of the fact that my favorite series of all time includes Red Rising and Long Price Quartet and Malazan, because I feel like I'm really proud of how much I've been able to expand my reading tastes and really enjoying lots of different styles. So
she hates Gene Wolfe and Sarah J. Maas as their works, not their people.
Yes.
But,
I did. No, well, okay. Technically, Anita, I didn't. I just said I dislike both of their works. Hate both of their works immensely. But
I haven't read any Gene Wolfe yet.
Best of luck.
Harrow the Ninth. So Tanner, are you reading Spear right now? Because I think Spear is the runner-up to Harrow for the most confusing book I've ever read. Harrow is insane, where like you don't have, like, at least with Spear, I have like verifiable pieces of information to help me with the puzzle. Harrow the Ninth, you don't have anything. Like everything you think you know, you might not know.
Right.
So like I don't know what's going on in that book. I had a thought somewhere and I totally lost it. So we're gonna move past it. I really want to try Gene Wolfe, but I have worries about it.
I think you should talk to like I mean, kind of like what I did for a couple of authors I'm going to try this year, like talking to people who've read him and also know you as a reader to be able to point you in the direction of like, okay, for you specifically, here's where you should, because like, I think so many people just kind of throw out the, well, start here because that's the like, you know, general starting point. Because my husband is a huge Gene Wolfe fan. He really likes Gene Wolfe a lot, and I love that for him. But I know that there's he's got a ton of stuff. So
yeah, I remember what I was going to say, which is that I really take pride in, like, some people call it like middle of the roading, but like I like the diversity of being able to like both, like see both sides of a thing.
Yeah,
and it extends to most stuff. Like we talked about it with Malazan, but like even with just like, there's always this like Sanderson versus Erickson debate that I don't know. It's totally arbitrary. I don't know why people decided
you can like both.
And I'm just like, well, lots of people do like both, but it's like the people who specifically like, they'll be like Erickson, like, oh, Sanderson can never write. I mean, I just don't. Why are these the scale spectrums? I don't even think for the reason people say it makes sense, because like people say Erickson is complicated and then therefore Sanderson isn't. Sanderson is complicated in similar ways to Erickson, but then in other ways totally not.
Right.
It's more just like obfuscation of information. But I like both a lot, and so I don't know why. So yeah, like having wide variety of tastes is just fun for me, because then I'm able to, what I ultimately want to be able to do is make good recommendations to people.
Right. Yep.
And so I think I'm very good at it. Like, it is the one of the only things that I feel very confident. I'm like, I'm really good at recommending things to people.
Yeah.
And so then it drives me crazy when, like, you know, somebody at work is like, what's a good show that people, and like everybody will mention like the newest Netflix show.
Right. Yep.
And I'm like, that's just like at the tip of your mind because it's popular. But I'm like, I want to know questions about like what you like, and I will tell you a show that you will really like.
Right.
But then they don't trust me more than, because I'm one voice. I'm one person saying you'll really like Mad Men versus 12 people telling them to watch Baby Reindeer. And I'm not saying that Baby Reindeer is bad. I'm just like, you're more likely to like Mad Men based on what you told me. So
right.
But you know, it's just a deluge of everybody giving recommendations all the time. So
well, and you know, the general population outside of our insane obsessed nerd bubble, which I love, like it's all kind of on the peripheral. Like, we're just so entrenched in it all the time that we have a deeper reach of like what we can recommend because we're, you know, obsessed. So a lot of people, even with shows and all that kind of stuff, half the time they haven't even watched the show. They're just like, oh, everybody's obsessed with that thing that I keep hearing in the general mainstream all the time. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And Baby Reindeer is very good. That was just like a popular show that came to my head as an example. I really like Baby Reindeer.
Hey,
I definitely
thanks, Ian.
am a nerd. So when 100%. Your book came out, I started it, and it was terrible. So I DNF'd it. No, I'm just kidding. I started it because I wanted to sample it because at the end of the year I had a bunch of stuff going on, but I really want to read Tori's book. So I read the first 2 chapters, and I really liked them. I thought they were a really good setup.
Thank you.
Then I was like, I will totally read this in January. And don't ask me what month it is.
Nope, I totally get that.
But I really, it's one of those things where you always worry where your friends like release a book and I'm like, what if I secretly don't like it? But no, I really, really like it.
I am never offended. I've had too many friends write books in my lifetime to ever be offended when people are hesitant. Because I get it. I totally get it. Even now, like in the indie community, whenever I know somebody that I'm really close to and I read their book for the first time, I get really nervous because I'm like, what do I do if I don't like it? So totally get it.
I understand that. Like, I understand if I read the book and I didn't like it, unless I came over here and was like, Tori, you're the worst writer I've ever seen, then like, you're going to be fine with it. But still, it's just, you always want to like your friends.
Oh yeah.
It's just one of those things where, and I worried when I read Zach's books, like Zach Argyle, I was like, oh no, what if I don't like them? They were really good. So the only person I'm confident that if I don't like will be fine is Philip Chase. I'll just tell him to his face. Like, Philip, you're a bad writer. And he'll be like, oh, thank you so much for your great opinion, Kyle. I'm filled with compassion for you.
Yeah, somebody asked me
Philip
in a
is
live
great.
stream the other day, who's the meanest booktuber? And without missing a beat, I was like, Philip Chase, hands down.
One of these days, somebody's gonna never have experienced Philip's
And they're gonna think we're all
videos,
serious.
and they're gonna think we're serious. They're like, I don't want to talk to that Philip guy. I have told this story before, but not for a while. The first time I ever came across Philip, I did not like him at all. It was a very specific. It actually ties into what we were talking about earlier, where it was after Steven Erikson had a big fight over some stuff in a Malazan community. There was a big thing. People were attacking him. A whole bunch of drama happened. But I had wanted to know more about the situation, and Philip had been like one of the people in the conversation. So Philip did a video, and this was when he was way smaller. And so it was my first exposure to him. And he has this tweed jacket on, and he's like, obviously in a very particular situation where like he really likes Steven Erikson. He liked the people he was talking with. Everything up along the proportion. I totally get it. But at the time, I had none of that context. And he just was sitting there like hem and hawing and being like, yeah, you know, like, I don't even remember what he said, but however he said it with no context, I was like, this guy's pretentious. And I was like, I'm never going to watch this guy's videos ever again. And then I can't believe I thought that, because Philip is the least pretentious person of all time. Yeah. And he's super kind. Super nice. And in that moment, he was clearly just trying to like be generous to everybody. But
see both sides.
Yeah. And I just like, it's just so funny in hindsight.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's whenever you're coming into a new space and you're meeting new people, it is a little bit nerve-wracking, because you never know who you're going to get along with and who you might not. And I mean, every time I went on like a new channel for a live stream of somebody that I hadn't really talked to before, I was nervous, because I was like, what if we don't get along? Then it's going to be awkward.
Yeah, there's just things that like even in hindsight are funny. Like the very first time we ever interacted was a little awkward. Do you remember it?
Kyle, I don't remember anything, so
okay. I remember it because I felt really awkward, which is that you had Baptiste on your channel to talk about Yellow Sky Revolt, and then I had wanted to do a chat with him and Alan.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you messaged me, and it was the first time we'd ever communicated in any interaction. You were like, "Hey, I'm gonna have Alan and Baptiste on my channel. Do you want to be on it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was actually going to do that." And I truly, genuinely did not care who hosts. Yeah. But because we had never had a conversation, it was really awkward where you're like, I don't care who hosts. I'm cool either way. And I was like, I'm cool either way. And it was just so awkward for no reason.
No, you. It's fine. No, you. Yeah. I remember that now. Yeah. That was funny. That was a good discussion, though.
Yeah, it was.
We had a great time.
That was fun. Alan was just impersonating all of Dynasty Warriors,
which was fantastic.
The Philip video? Is this an actual video he did? Jimmy, I can't tell if you're joking. I feel like you're joking, but I don't know for sure. It doesn't seem like a Philip thing to do. Oh, maybe it's because he got like really ranty reviews when his book came out. That might be why. So what's
which is not, I mean, that's never fun, in fairness, but
yeah.
It is, going back to like reading your friends' books. Speaking of Goodreads reviews, like I feel like too, there's a big difference in like the approach that different authors have to how they respond to people having opinions about their books. So like, and I have the privilege of having had a lot of, I grew up in that world. Like I was self-published when I was 14. So like I had somebody tell me that they threw my book in the garbage when I was 16 years old for the first, like, you know what I mean? Like I've been there.
You're baptized in it.
Exactly. So like, I just like, if you read Bloodstones and you're like, this is hot garbage, I'd be like, I'm really sorry it didn't work for you. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I don't know, like, yeah, I'd be sad about it, but I just kind of.
Have you, like, as you've gone through your author experiences, do you have like a hard rule about how you respond to reviews, or is it kind of play by the situation, or what? I don't. So I will never respond to a Goodreads review or an Amazon review, because that's, you know, that's not for me. Right. I read them all, but I don't respond to them. Unless somebody like tags me. So like I get tagged on Twitter all the time of like, I'm reading your book now. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Thanks. You know, or I read your book and here's the review or whatever. So if people tag me specifically, then I'll respond to it.
It is hard sometimes because, you know, as you might imagine, everybody's coming from very different experiences and reading tastes and all that kind of stuff. And if people read the book and they're just like, this isn't for me, that doesn't bother me at all. If they say something in their review that factually isn't true, that's really hard not to respond to. I'm like, I don't want to be the like, well, actually, you know, so that is hard. But I mean, unless I get publicly called out by somebody for something in my books, I try really hard not to respond.
Yeah, it's a bad look. The exception that I've seen, there was one time that I saw this, where I'm going to say the author's name wrong because I don't remember it entirely, but it's the Son of the Storm series. It's like Suyi Okunboa or something like that. I'm really sorry that I'm saying his name wrong, but I saw somebody, like right when that book was coming out, I saw somebody give it a 1-star review, and they were talking about how the book was racist or something akin to that because they were talking about the person being yellow skinned or something along. They called someone yellow, and the author replied to this. And at first, when he replied to it, like right when I saw he replied, I was like, "Ooh, this is gonna be bad."
Yeah.
And he actually, it was really, really well thought out and like explained exactly. And he was like, "I'm from Nigeria. This means a certain thing in my culture. I don't have any like cultural awareness of what this means to you guys. I don't want to like dishonor my own heritage, but I understand." Like it was really, really well done. And I was like, all right, so apparently it is possible to actually in a good way, but that's the only time I've ever seen it done.
The only time I stepped in on Goodreads was right before Bloodstones came out. Somebody 1-star review bombed it, who I knew didn't have an arc because I knew exactly who I'd sent them all to. And so I reached out to Goodreads and just said, hey, so my book isn't even out yet, and this person definitely doesn't have a copy. So can you remove that? That's the only one I've ever stepped in on. But
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's a weird Goodreads phenomenon. Just like, right, like Winds of Winter has like 5,000 ratings or something. I'm like, guys, chill.
My favorite review so far on Bloodstones that actually just made my entire day was actually a 2-star review. And somebody just said, this book is too emo for me. And I was like, yes. Like, I will never be sad about my book being too emo.
Yeah. Was that Phased or was that Bloodstones?
That was Bloodstones.
Oh, interesting. Too emo. Yeah. Well, that's good.
Hey, you know what? If that's fair.
Yeah. I somebody recently, like, oh, I can't remember what book it was now, but they like, oh, it was you. Actually, it was you. Somebody, you didn't say anything, but somebody said in a comment that they were now really interested in reading Ship of Magic after your review.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, not blown away, but it was really interesting to me because I was like, they were like, oh, she said it was like really traumatizing and stuff. And that like really got me interested for the first time. And I was like,
so excited.
Crazy. But like,
yeah,
it really cements that like even a negative review done well is going to get some people interested in a book.
That's why I tell new authors, like, yeah, it's hard. Like when you get your first 1-star, your first 2-star review, it's hard. But like recognizing that that's not a bad thing. It actually gives you a lot of validity when you go on somebody's Goodreads page for their book and you see they have the full gamut of stars. You've got a full gamut of reviews to look at from a whole bunch of different perspectives. And a lot of times, like I've actually bought books based on 1-star or 2-star reviews before. The 3 stars are my favorite. Those are the ones I go to first.
I always look for, because they're going to have more pros and cons.
Both sides.
Especially if you're like, if it's a popular author, like you can't get any RF Kuang reviews that are 5 stars upon release. Like if you were looking at Babel, you just have no idea. You have to look at the 3 stars.
Right.
Because it's just ridiculous otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes if all of my friends, like if I go through my friends thing and all of them are 5 stars, that tells me I'm more likely to like the book. But
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Andrew, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a while, buddy. Nice to talk to you. I love Andrew. He's so nice.
Andrew is awesome.
Yeah, and a good author. I really like his. I haven't tried the one that you really like. Katamir. What is the name of the series?
Collation.
I really want to read that series, but I read I read the other ones.
If you really liked Long Price Quartet, I think because it's similar in the sense that it's like nobody I've ever met in the indie community world builds to the depth that Andrew does. Like the
That's what I love to hear.
like the detail in his books and just how much he knows about his world and his characters is genuinely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So
Self-pub is such a rich field of stuff. And then I hit a bit of a problem with self-pub for a little bit there, and we can talk about it a little bit. I know that you have strong opinions on this too, which is I read 2 books that I really did like in self-pub, which is fine. That happens. But the discourse around those books were very problematic to me, in the sense that like I thought they had very clear flaws or things that like you could mention, and they were just being blown up as these like 2 amazing, incredible books. And then it really made me reassess how I talk about self-pub, because if we just blow up every self-pub book that we read and don't talk about the flaws or like our honest opinions of them, then when people go to them and they read them, they're expecting our credibility is on the line, and I think it hurts everybody. If people come to, and I'm going to say the name out loud because everybody knows what I'm talking about anyway. I put it in a video, 11th Cycle. If people read 11th Cycle, because all of these people are hyping it up as the greatest thing, and they don't mention the parts that might not work for people or the literal objective flaws in that book, and then people go and read it, then they're like, I guess this is just the best that self-pub has to offer. If all of these authors are giving this glowing best of the best reviews, and there's not mentioning that this guy literally can't put a sentence together that makes any sense, and then that's just must be what all self-pub is like. And then they don't read more self-pub. So it really like drove me crazy, and I had to like really think through my stance on this.
I mean, I say it louder for the people in the back, honestly. Like, as somebody who is a longtime self-published author, reviewer, fantasy nerd, like, I have a vested interest in seeing indie authors succeed. I love when I get an indie book that just blows me away, and I'm like, this is what indie can produce, right? And the other side of that too is people are often starting their career in indie and like they're publishing their first book ever. And so you kind of get to see, I enjoy getting to see authors grow as they put more and more books out. You can see like as they're learning more about their craft and their voice. That is really exciting to me, because you do get that a little bit in TradPub too, but there's more people that have been all over it. You know what I mean? Which sometimes is a good thing and sometimes is a bad thing. Because weirdly, there are pros and cons to everything. Imagine.
Wild take.
I know, wild, super hot take. And yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation with several other people before. I'm a firm believer in the fact that just 5-star toxic positivity on everything, because it is indie, is incredibly harmful to the industry. And I don't judge my indie books any differently than I judge TradPub when I'm reviewing stuff. I don't, because that's not helpful. Like, and sometimes that might come across to some people as harsh, but like, I'm also, honesty is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to fake a review just because it's an indie book. Because to me, I feel like that's more of an injustice to the author than anything else I could do.
Absolutely. So. And just because I know people like go the opposite way with this, like, I don't think the people who did love the book were lying about the book. Like, I agree that loving 11th Cycle or any other self-help book is awesome. Like, there are things in that book that, like, the way people were talking about it felt overall disingenuous in the fact that nobody was mentioning these things that I felt like needed to be mentioned.
I agree. I also had a big issue with that book specifically because of some of the content.
And and there's content in there that like is not like, again, I said objectively before, that's more like the way the sentences were constructed and editing problems. But there are very big things in that book that need to be discussed. And if you hate the book or the way it handles it, that is subjective, and that's totally fine. But it should still be like, here's some things this author did, and like, you know, like I don't know, it just kind of brought all these things up to the surface for me. But because of that, I took like a big step back from reading self-pub for a little bit while I kind of like reassessed how I want to talk about it. And I kind of landed the same place that you did, which is that like, I'm not going to be mean, but I really do want to just be like, hey, this book like is fine. Like,
I think it goes back, like, just be a nice person. Like, if I dislike an indie book, I'm going to lay out, here's the issues I had with it. You know, it didn't work for me because of these things. I may also include, I think that this would be a good fit for people who like X, X, and X. And this is a personal thing, because I know other people aren't as comfortable with this, but I'm like, anything I say in a review, I know that the author is most likely going to read it. So anything that I say in that review, like, not that I'm not going to be honest, but I'm also going to say it in a way that I would say it to the author's face.
absolutely.
You know, and you can still have constructive criticism and negative things to say about the book to their face. It's just how you put that. And that was the big thing that, like, when I did my honest reviews for Self Pub, there were some things that were kind of taken out of context in what I imagine and what I said in the video. And one of those was that I was advocating for people to judge indie differently than trad pub, which is not true. I don't think you should do that, which is what I said in the video. But also how you say things. Like, if you come on and you're like, wow, this author is hot garbage and should never be allowed near a keyboard again, that's really not nice, and it's not helpful even to other readers. Like, heck, you know, even if the author never sees it, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
You know, so
I saw a 5-hour rant review for Fourth Wing recently.
Yeah.
I didn't watch it. And I was like, I think this is overkill. Like, maybe this is too much. There's like entire essays taking down a Star Wars park that are shorter than this. Like, you know, I was like,
right.
I mean, do whatever content you want, but I think you could have.
I mean, if you have that much to say, I guess. But I mean, yeah.
I couldn't imagine. Have you read any like of those books? Like Fourth Wing or anything? No.
I've read the first 3 Court of Thorns and Roses books, and
you hated them.
Yes, with a fiery passion, and not the intended one. So romantasy is a genre that I don't begrudge other people loving at all. For me personally, it is like the last thing on the planet I want to read. Like, it's not my genre.
I am finally going to read some Sarah J. Maas, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to like it.
Sure.
But the reason I'm going to read it is twofold. One, I just think that it's so big that it's worth trying. Like, I just think, as somebody that's really in the fantasy sphere, it's not going to harm me to try it. And then second of all, I've noticed that a lot of my female friends that don't read very much are reading Sarah J. Maas.
Oh yeah.
And as somebody who wants to be able to give good recommendations,
if you like that,
it's hard for me to do in good conscience if I haven't read it. So, like, for me, I can just relate to my friends better. Like, if they've only read 5 books this year and it's Court of Roses and Thorns or whatever, then I can at least talk to them about it. We can have a conversation. And then secondly, then I can be like, oh, here's some shit that's like that, but like not crap.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe I'll like it. Like, I'm going to keep an open mind. I just don't, I don't foresee it being what happens. But,
sure. I mean, you might just be entering your romantasy era, Kyle. You never know.
Yeah, me and Laura, you know.
I know.
I did like Fourth Wing, though, but I would not have read Fourth Wing had I known it was romantasy. I got it before release, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I have the first Throne of Glass book on hold at the library, Anita, so I'm going to try both of them and see how it goes.
Well, I think that is a good point, though, because, I mean, if I say, like, I don't like romantasy and I really hated the ACOTAR books, but I also have friends that read Sarah J. Maas and really love them. And yeah, like, being able to give good recommendations. And I'm glad that I read the first 3 only because I feel a lot more confident entering the conversation about them.
Yeah.
Because I've actually read them. I'm not just saying this is my opinion based on never having read any of it.
Yeah, I agree.
And Anitha, to answer your question about why I didn't stop at book 1, so a very close friend of mine, that was her favorite series. And I think only the first 3 books were out at that time. And it was one of those, like, kind of morbid fascination situations where, like, you absolutely, like, can't stand it, but you also can't, like, you're like it has to get better at some point, right? So yeah, I committed to reading the first 3, but
that's right. Well, now you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I have very solid opinion of my opinions on that
I
series.
think unless I absolutely hate everything about the first book, I will read the first two because a lot of people say that they really like the second one, and I think that'll give me a good spattering. But I just
The
shots fired
environment
all
and
of them.
characters change a lot between the first two books.
Good to know.
In some ways, not necessarily the characters, but like the how they all relate to each other. We'll put it that way.
Okay. Have you ever
Exactly.
read any Dresden?
No.
Is that on your TBR?
No.
Yeah, I figured. Why not?
So
Tori.
again, absolute shout out to all of my lovely friends who love Dresden. I love that for you. I've heard enough about it, and again, I haven't read them, so these are assumptions that I have made based on what I've heard. I think that the male gaze-ness of that series would make me want to, throw it out the window.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like I'd say for lots of people, I think you would really like book 12 to 17.
Sure.
But and it's not like I will recommend some people plow through the series to get to those books. Right. But not people who I think would hate them.
Right.
Yeah. So
and that's the thing.
Really hate some of the stuff in the early books.
I totally trust people who say I absolutely believe that I would probably like those, and it's the same thing with Wheel of Time, where people are like, oh, just read until book 10 and then it'll be great.
Book 10 is the worst one.
Yeah, I can't remember. I've never read them.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's I get anxiety just looking at my bookshelves with all of the books I haven't read yet, and I'm like, if I have to, with any series like that, I can't reconcile taking that time away from books that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and it's a long series.
Yeah.
It's just so satisfying as a Dresden fan because, have you seen Jake's Cycle of Dresden? Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, he did this thing. It's incredibly accurate, and I'm gonna paraphrase it.
Sure.
But it's the first step is skepticism, where it's yeah, I don't really. I mean, they're fine. Maybe this just isn't my thing. And then the second step is false sense of security or false superiority or something like that. Where you're oh, these books are good. False peak, that's what it's called. False peak. Oh, these books are good. I could see why people really like these books. If they stay at this consistent quality, then I'll really like the series. And then the third stage is just loud screaming. And then the fourth stage is frustration because you're now at the end of the cycle and you get to see the people that are in step one, skepticism. And you're no, I was where you were. I promise. And then the thing is I've seen, so I follow that trajectory exactly as so many Dresden fans do. And now that I'm on the end of the stage, I get to see Josh from Red Fury Books just kind of is going through this now. He's in False Peak, if anybody's curious. He thinks they're good. He's giving them 5 stars. And I'm just wait, buddy.
Yeah.
But False Peak the Cycle of Dresden isn't as satisfying if you were to just be 1 star, 1 star, 2 star, 1 star, 2 star, 2 star, 5 stars. I'd just be why did you suffer through all this?
Right. Well, I mean, and it's, I think to me, there's a difference too between male gaze in a character and male gaze in the way the book is written. You can kind of tell sometimes it's both, and sometimes it's a very intentional character choice. And that, I get that. But I mean, I've read books where it was so obviously the author, not the character, that I was just no.
Yeah. So I think it's a little in the middle for Jim Butcher, and I think really big Jim Butcher fans are going to be mad at me for saying this. There's no way that an author that is not a little sexist could have written the books from Dresden's POV, and that it's just baked into it too much, and especially as he gets better at it in later books, you're okay, well now you're thinking about it this way. So clearly, in the earlier books, you were just more sexist. So I do think there is some problematic actual writing to it, but also I have read outside of Dresden and it's not
right.
So I know that it is also that Harry Dresden is that way. So,
and the other thing too, that I think this is an interesting conversation overall, is the idea that I think in some cases we've gotten to a point where authors aren't allowed to grow.
Yes.
That they are judged on they're early, like this is, and clearly like 30 years later, oh, they're the same person or they're writing the same, and like that bothers me because I'm not I mean, cancel culture as an extreme version is something that I really hate a lot. And so like, I'm definitely not the type of person who's like, I'm not even going to give this a chance. But I think in this case specifically, it's more just, I don't know that I would enjoy it enough to, like you said, to warrant the whole series.
And yes, Sal, you can skip to book 7. Some people are going to be so mad at me saying this, but literally Jim Butcher suggested this. So like, I am not.
Yeah, but what does the author know, Kyle?
For sure. You have to catch every reference. The reason he said that is because I guess when book 7 came out, it was the first time he was getting a hardcover release. Mm-hmm. And so he wrote book 7 in a way that could be like a soft reset, not a reset, but a soft introduction of the series to people who were just jumping on for the first time because it was in hardcover. Yeah. And from what I understand, he has said that like you can just start with book 7 because that's when he's a better author. And I agree. Like I think the 7th book is the first really good one. And if you were to ever give Dresden a chance, I actually think Tori in particular should just start with 7 because if I think that's the plot and the characters and everything about that is good enough, and the male gaziness has gone down enough that that would be a better picture. Because like the problem with the first book is that everything in that book is just and also he's really just like check out the legs on that lady. So it's like all you can focus on. But at least you have a better idea of like the pros and cons of the series. You have a good balance.
Yeah. See, I just think I agree, Sal. I think that would be funny. There are specific instances I know I would be really torqued off about. That particular part wouldn't bother me, I don't think.
I'm missing what her comment was. Yeah, so the third Dresden book, a lot of people say, is where it gets good. And I thought that book was the worst for the male gaze. Like I feel like half that book was nibbles. I talked about this like 2 streams ago, so it's gonna be repetitive, but I really didn't like it. I was like,
that was me with Fritz Leiber, so I get it.
Yeah. And I went back and reread it because everybody talks about that's when the series gets good, and I'm like, no, it's still mid, and it just made me feel better that I'm like, actually, I didn't get like PTSD or like Stockholm syndrome from reading all these Dresden books. It's just that like he did get way better, so that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Emperor's Blade, the feminism in it made me trouble. Well, women can't sit the unhewn throne, Sal. Like,
it is known. It is known.
To move to something more popular, though, how are the Red Rising sequels treating you?
Well, I'm about to read Dark Age probably next week as soon as I finish my current read.
Very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's interesting coming into it like so long after they've come out. Because I can already see, I think, the steps from an author perspective. I can already see the steps that led Pierce to the point where he was like, I don't know what I'm doing with the end of this. I need to take a break and like recenter and figure out how to write Lightbringer. Because even in Iron Gold, there were moments where I'm like, I can almost feel him through the page starting to like lose a couple things here. And that's honestly fine by me. That doesn't bother me at all. Cause I love those characters so much that I'm just like, and I have a huge amount of respect for Pierce as an author. But do I think that the second series is going to surpass the first one for me? I would be very surprised by that. I'll be very surprised.
I think you've entrenched yourself so much in the first trilogy that like it's just not going to be knocked off for you. Like
which is fine.
Like anything can happen, but like I think you could easily think that the second trilogy or the second series is like better technically, but like the first trilogy, you've read it so many times, it means so much to you.
Yeah.
And this was handled poorly, but I have to think it's the same for people who watched the original Star Wars and they loved it.
Sure.
And then they came to, the new sequels, and like Luke, Han, and Leia were in such different life phases. Now let's imagine a world where they handled those characters well. That's just even just
right.
Even just like if it was the best version of those characters 30 years later, you've lived with them at this age for so long. That's how they're entrenched in your memory. And even if like you're enjoying new adventures with those characters, they're not going up against Darth Vader and then learn, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
that is the cemented real,
right.
And so I think you'll end up enjoying them. But
and for all of there were a few characters that felt like he'd kind of lost them a little bit in the plot that he was working with.
Yeah.
Severo, I'm pleased to say, is the through line. He's
there's something in Dark Age, and there's so many things in Dark Age that this won't give you any pointers. There's something in Dark Age that like he just completely drops in Lightbringer. And now whether he brings it back later, like I don't know, but it's so clear that like what you were saying, that he realized he needed to think through some stuff, and he took all that time. He threw out half a novel.
Good for him.
I think that was one of the things that he realized was actually just not going the way that he wanted, because like there's almost just no reference to it. And I was like, oh, he just decided he didn't want to go this route. So that's a little bit what he gets for being a pantser. But hey, the books are really good anyway. So
I mean, as a fellow pantser, I can understand that. I think, and it you know, I do think that it's something I wish more authors would trust themselves on. Like if something is really not working, take a step back instead of like just, forcing it. So I actually think that him taking a break on that was a really good choice. And I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to getting done with Dark Age and then seeing how like Iron Gold and Dark Age compared to Lightbringer. I'm really interested to see that.
I mean, Lightbringer is my favorite of the series, and also like made me like the series in general a lot more. My issue with Pierce Brown, I think I mentioned this to you in a Boxer message one time, is that he values shock value more than I do. So in each of the books, I feel like he makes a decision that like doesn't service the overall meta narrative or character arcs, but it's just like, wouldn't it be really shocking to just brutally murder this guy? And so I'm like, yeah, but it would have been better if this guy had like been able to do this stuff. And like once in a while, that's fine. I feel like he does it too often. That would be my major criticism of him as an author. And I feel like in Lightbringer, that is absent. I feel like everything in Lightbringer is very intentional, and the characters who do die or the decisions everybody makes, I feel like everything feels way more intentional.
Sure.
And so that made me level up the whole series, if that makes sense. So I'm really excited for the last book, and I'm really excited to reread, because now that I know where everything's going, I think my reread is going to go swimmingly.
Yeah, I'm excited too, because I know I think mentioned that he's got like a fantasy series idea that he might go to next after this is done, which excites me a lot. I'm very curious to see, because I mean, I've gotten in trouble for saying this on my channel before, but I still 100% hold to the fact that Red Rising is sci-fantasy. 100%. I don't think it is purely sci-fi. I do think that there are a lot of epic fantasy elements in it. And I think
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, I probably agree with you, but I want to qualify what
because I think if you look at like, and again, I'm saying this as a fantasy nerd, not as a sci-fi nerd. So I want to make that clear, because I'm not as familiar with sci-fi as I am with fantasy, but I think that's one of the reasons why I saw so much fantasy in it. The planets and the setting and the technology and the where is humanity going rather than where it's been kind of, switch up is obviously there, but it's such a it's basically an epic. If you look at like an epic fantasy world military conflict, like general layout, you can basically fit it straight into Red Rising, where you have all of these different, different ruling factions and the common people, and it's kind of a revolution. I mean, it's such
about the tropes and the
and the characters.
I agree with you there.
Yeah, like it's still sci-fi, definitely, but I think it's really blends the two really well.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like, I guess space opera is like the term for it, but like it, especially later on, I think there's actually like fantasy elements. But in the first book, especially, it's just like, Hunger Games in space. Like it really. Like, I know you hate that, but I only mean that in the sense that it's playing with the same type of tropes.
My only issue,
using a different aesthetic,
and the reason why I always like kind of combat that isn't because of the readers. It makes me very angry that the marketing team on Red Rising was like Katniss on the front cover, because that immediately, in my opinion, cheapens Red Rising from what it is and puts it into a very, like, if you go into it like, oh, this is just the Hunger Games, and then everybody's like, wow, this is so YA. I'm like, I mean, a little, but not really. But I think that people have that expectation going into it simply because of all of the Hunger Games. And I think it kind of cheapens both series in a way, instead of allowing them to be their own thing. But I soapbox over.
I totally agree with you.
But
I'm going to respond to Rogue real quick. I don't know if you like Dark Age, specifically because Dark Age is really, really hard to know if people will like. Dark Age is some of the darkest things I've ever read.
Wow.
And I just like, Rogue, you have to, like, I would have to know things you did and didn't like more on like an individual basis to give you a good recommendation on that. I do think you really like Lightbringer. So unless you like hated Dark Age, I think overall you're gonna have to. But Dark Age, I think, is the best written one up until Lightbringer. Like, it's very good writing. It's so evocative and like harrowing, and like, especially with the understanding of Lightbringer. You know what he's trying to do with Dark Age more. I think it was maybe a little bit harder for people who didn't go straight into Lightbringer after, because you had years to just settle on how Dark Age was. But yeah, I absolutely think the Lightbringer is worth it to get through. And what I was going to say in response to you, Tori, is the reason I don't like the comparison to Hunger Games and Red Rising is that it really makes people lean into Red Rising is YA, which it is totally fine if a book is YA.
It's not YA.
But I recently reread The Hunger Games, and you know what? That is a YA book, everybody. And you know what isn't? Red Rising. Read them near each other. It's so different. In like the second chapter of Red Rising, it is way more grim, way more brutal than anything happens in Hunger Games.
100%.
Hunger Games is written so much more YA.
Well,
and again, I love the Hunger Games. I am not insulting it. I'm just saying
and this is literally like not a spoiler because it's in the first chapter of the first book. But like, you already have, I know they're young, but you already have two characters at the center of the first couple of chapters who are married. You are dealing with marital issues in literally the first couple of chapters. I'm like, that is not like, not that you can't have those themes in a YA book, but it's so not. I want to do a video at some point.
I would almost argue that you maybe couldn't. Like, maybe if like, you know, the main character is like a teenager and then their parents are having marital issues as a side. But I actually think having a married main character dealing with marriage issues disqualifies something from being YA.
I mean, I would agree with that.
Yeah, because that is a central thing that a teenager is just not experiencing. And like, you know, I mean, obviously Darrow is a teenager and he's experiencing it, but like generally speaking in our life, right?
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, at some point I really want to do a deep dive analysis video on the first section of the first book of Red Rising and just like really dig out all of the things in it that make it not YA, but also there's so much. People just kind of like, oh, I got to get through the first book to get to the second book. And I actually love the first book. I really love the first book. And I can completely understand why people kind of bounce off of it a little bit. But I've read the first book more than any of the other books yet. I've read it 6 times. And I'm listening to the audio drama now for the first time, which is incredible, by the way. If anybody hasn't read it yet and you're like, should I? Definitely check out the multi narrator audio drama because it's amazing.
Does that have a lot of background music, or is it pretty subtle?
It's like some sound effects and stuff, but not a ton.
I did Emperor's Soul graphic audio, and that was really good. But I was going to do my reread of Warbreaker and graphic audio, and the mixing of that was terrible. Where like the background music was loud the whole time, and I was like, I don't know who made this decision, but
no, it's not that bad.
Good, yeah.
Sal also had a question I didn't want to forget about. Up a little ways. Tori, would you ever re-edit your books like a director's cut? I mean, I made like way in the future when I actually have a finished trilogy, I may consider doing something like a special edition or something like that. But I mean, other than a few touch-up things, probably not. Just because I'm a big believer in unless it's absolutely awful, and like you have to go back and fix it for big reasons. I'd just rather move on and write the next book.
So you're not going to release the uncut stand edition of Bloodstones where it's 200,000 extra words?
Nope. They're not there. I have a couple of chapters I cut out that I saved, but yeah, I wouldn't want to put those back in anyways.
So Rogue, with my answer to this question, I think there's going to be a couple things in Dark Age that bother you. But then again, like Lightbringer doesn't have those issues. So there's a twist in Dark Age that like, or not a twist, but like an event in Dark Age that I think is the worst. Like from just like a narrative view, I think it's the biggest mistake that Pierce ever did. I don't, and people have tried to defend it to me, and I'm like, I just think this was
in Dark
like,
Age.
In Dark Age. I just think this is the actual like bad call to make for the series. But other than that, I think that book is great.
I'm going to be really curious since I'm reading it pretty soon. I will see if I can figure out probably what it is, and then I'll message you.
Yeah, sounds good. And just in general, like if you have any spoiler thoughts about Dark Age, just send them to me because I'm really interested. I knew your reaction to Iron Gold is relatively what I expected it to to be, but Dark Age could go anywhere. So
I'm going to vlog it.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited for it.
I'm going to vlog it. I was going to say vlogs, actually, surprisingly, like people love vlogs, but they don't do very well, which is weird. At least like specific books usually.
Probably a spoiler vlog, maybe.
I do spoiler vlogs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, so maybe less people are able to watch each individual one.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Derry, I hate the kid. It's very interesting that The Stand is one of my favorite books of all time, and there's an entire chapter in it that like I literally want to like tear out of the book and set on fire, and then like mail the ashes to Stephen King, written in like a "How dare you?" Like I really hate that chapter. But it's still one of my favorite books of all time. So.
Yeah. Did I tell you that on a complete whim? No, I don't think I've only told a couple people this actually. On a complete whim, I have decided to try Stephen King this year for the first time.
Okay. I have read all of the Stephen King books that are in existence. So tell me why
I want to know
why you decided and what you might start with, and I'll go from
I'd actually be more curious to know, knowing my reading taste, what you like would be the one or two books you would recommend to see if they're the ones I'm starting with. Because I've already ordered them. They're on the way. The reason I wanted to try it was like I'm at a point now where I do want to expand, not necessarily that I'm not going to become a horror fan. Like that's just not my thing. However, I want to try a book or two of his just because he is so widely read among the circles that I'm in. And he's written so many books that I'm quite convinced that I would enjoy at least one of them.
You like a lot more than one.
Yeah, and I think that too. So I was very particular about which books. They were kind of self-recs based on some research and also some recommendations from some other people that have read Stephen King. And I'm looking forward to it because there's a big difference between like people just shooting, like we talked about before, shooting a recommendation at you like, oh, read this one or this one because that's the one that they recommend to everybody, you know. So, and then also having more personalized recs.
Is the reason that you haven't read him before simply that you just associate him with horror?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
And people have given you the pitch now that he writes a lot more than just horror?
Yes.
You're aware of this? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So my number one pick for you would be Different Seasons. I think that is a very good start. I would be very shocked if you didn't like The Body. Like that's the movie Stand By Me was based on.
Oh, sure. Yep. Which I've seen.
Yeah. So that is just an excellent coming of age tale.
Okay. Love it.
A motley crew of teenagers. The whole premise of the book or the novella is that they hear that there's a dead body in the woods up north, and they have to just try and get to it because they want to see a dead body. But it's really just about their lives and how they're growing up and changing and stuff. Excellent novella.
Love a motley crew coming of age story.
Yeah, but also Shawshank Redemption is in there, which is also very good. And then Apt Pupil is the third one, which Apt Pupil is really good at some of the things that Stephen King is best at, and it's a little disturbing, but it's not a horror novella, really.
Is it more Is
I'll
it
tell you what,
more like psychological?
yeah. So I'll
'Cause
tell you
that I'm
the premise
like,
of it.
okay.
So Apt Pupil is there's an old man who needs help with some stuff, like just like daily living things, and a teenager that's like really good at school and grades and stuff goes and helps him. And as he starts helping him, it starts to come out that maybe this old man has a few skeletons in his closet.
Mm.
And that's all I'll say for now. It is absolutely very dark. I just don't think it's a very horror-y novella until like maybe the end brings it
So
a
what
bit
I've
more.
told people in the past is like, I read a lot of military fiction and a lot of military fantasy, and violence and gore typically aren't going to bother me as much. But what I absolutely cannot stand is super suspenseful psychological terror. So like anything in that vein, I'm going to be a little bit more, because I've had chronic nightmares since I was 13, and it takes nothing for me to be like, I'm not looking for that. I know a lot of people are like, I want a book that'll give me nightmares. I don't want that.
Yeah, and I think, look, if you read Stephen King to be scared, that's obviously very valid. But I also think the opposite way happens, where people read a Stephen King book and expect it to be super terrifying, and then they're like, oh, I didn't really like it because it didn't scare me. And I'm like, yeah. Like my friend Jordan reads. It's like this. She loves Stephen King, and then she'll read a Stephen King book, and she's like, that wasn't very scary. 3 stars. And I'm like, but Jordan, it's a great book. Like,
and that's not what I'm looking for.
It's really just an expectations thing. So Different Seasons is my number 1 because it's 4 different styles that he does. They're all pretty short, and it gives you a good sampling of his style in a way that's not going to be really scary. That's my number 1. My number 2 would probably be. See, the problem with this one is that I don't know how you feel about the first book, but I think you would really love The Dark Tower.
I own it. I own the first one.
Okay. The first one's not very good, I don't think.
Is it confusing?
No, I don't. I mean, like, it's confusing in the sense that, like, it's just a guy in a desert walking around chasing a guy.
I mean,
so you're like, why is this going on? Like, but I think if you were to read The Dark Tower, you should read at least the first 2.
Okay.
Commit to that, because the first book is so different than the second book, and the reason that I think you would like it is the best thing about The Dark Tower, besides just the pure inventiveness, because it's very inventive, is the Quartet, which is the central crew. Like they are bound by fate, basically, to be like this like crew, and I think they are excellently done.
Love that.
It's great friendships, like some of the best inter-friendship dynamics that I've ever seen.
Nice.
And they are like motivated by destiny to be like a crew. So I just think that aspect of it will really, really work for you. And then it'll come down to whether or not the individual like Stephen King quirks will work for you. So that would be my recommendation there.
Cool.
And then also a really out of left field one that I think you might like, that's very controversial, and I might be dead wrong, is From a Buick 8. From a Buick 8 is one of his least well-known books, and it also has a very bad rating on Goodreads, so I'm always confused. I've always loved this book. The premise of the book is a teenager, or like maybe like 19-year-old, goes to this police station that his dad used to work at, and he's like interning at this police station, and there's a Buick in the back that nobody talks about and they're weird about, and his dad has since died, I believe, and so these are all his like dad's buddies that he's hanging out with, and he finally is like, guys, what's going on with this Buick? You guys are really weird about it. And they're like, should we tell him? And I'm like, yeah, we'll tell him. And so they sit down and they tell him the history of this Buick, and it's really weird. The only thing I'll say that's like, I think it's the first thing to say about it, it's basically like a portal to another dimension. So weird things happen when you're around this Buick, and it's each of these individual cops telling the story to this teenager, and you get to learn a lot of what's happened in the past and how it's influenced the way this teenager has seen his own life. And also like this whole police station, and like just in general, some weird stuff happens. So it is not a horror novel, I would call it. Like, I think there's one scene that like is a little gross, but other than that, like it's really just a sci-fi book. Yeah. And it's really slept on. But because it has such a low rating, I feel like there's something I'm not considering why people don't like it as much. Like it has like a 3.4 on Goodreads. I'm like, there has to be a reason that people don't like this book as much, but I've loved it. I've read it like 3 times. So
nice.
Yes, I absolutely agree with this, Jimmy.
Is that in Dark Tower?
Yeah. That's why I said it's like into some individual quirks that King goes, because I also like, we can talk about it when and if you ever get to Dark Tower, but I also hate some of those scenes, and then the way they happen after I end up liking it. So it's more like when you're in the muck of those scenes, they're not
Yeah.
great. So, but we can talk about that as you go on. I'll have better recommendations. But yeah, for
well,
sure.
I'll definitely check out different seasons
exactly
for
what I was
sure
thinking
and
of.
add it to my.
So, which ones were you?
None of the ones you mentioned, actually, which I'm kind of excited about.
There's so many good recommendations. Like I'm sure you picked some good ones too.
So the 4 that were recommended to me, and I bought so far 3 of them. One was a self-rec based on my own, just kind of, puttering around and looking at stuff. And then the other 3 were highly recommended from a couple different people. The first one that comes up a lot is 11 something
2263.
Yep, 2263.
I mean, yeah, that's my favorite book by him. I just didn't want to. Yeah. It's actually, no, I think you would love that book. Now that I'm thinking about it,
that one gets recommended the most to me. And I love historical fiction, so
that's and big historical fiction.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So that one I haven't purchased yet, but that one's definitely on my radar. And then my self-rec was one I was just, when I was looking through Goodreads and I had seen somebody talk about it on a video on BookTube outside of our community, was Billy Summers. Okay. And then the 2 that I bought were Duma-Key and Needful Things. It's the other one.
Okay. Coming. So Billy Summers is a hard one for me to know how you're going to feel about. I liked it. Like, it's not like a book I didn't like. It's a weird first book from him because it's not like any of his other books, really. Yeah. And there's some elements to the plot that like either will work for you in the way it's done or will absolutely not work for you. Mm-hmm. So that one's a little bit rougher in that sense. Needful Things, I famously have the worst take on. I don't like it at all. I did not like it. Most Stephen King fans really like it. I want to reread it and give it another shot. I think I was in a bad headspace when I read it, but it was like one of my least favorite Stephen King books, and it's like some people's absolute favorites. Yeah. So don't take my recommendation on that at all. Some of the stuff he does really well in that are really good, and the type of horror might be really good for you to step your feet into because it is a horror book, and it is, I guess, psychological horror, but it's not. It is not the type of psychological horror that I would be thinking would give someone a lot of nightmares. And I say that even as somebody who is like actually pretty easily scared. Sure. I think it's more like, so do you know the premise of Needful Things?
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the psychological horror is more like there's something really weird going on with this shop and like what's going on. So less likely to give you nightmares. And sorry, what was the third one again?
Duma-Key.
Oh yeah. Duma-Key is great. Love
that's the one I might start with, actually. That one's the one that I'm like most interested in starting with.
That was my favorite, or my first Stephen King book, and I reread it finally for the first time last year, and I was really scared that I wouldn't like it as much. And I definitely it didn't hold up to my memory of it being like my first Stephen King book, but that book is really good. It is scary in a couple scenes where like the horror is really well done, but mostly it's like this guy transitioning to a new state of his life. Because it's like an older man who's been a construction mogul for his whole life. He gets his arm cut off in an accident. He has to take retirement. So he goes to Florida and he takes up painting. And he's never painted before in his life. And he's really good at painting. And he's living in this new location. And I think Stephen King does all of that slice of life stuff and like finding a new role in your life really, really well. Mixed with this like kind of like dread horror of he can paint stuff that like it's not coming to life, but he's painting stuff that there's a second layer of things going on there. Yeah. I really like that book.
I'm excited about that
one. I think it's good.
Yeah. Because in the beginning, when I would ask for recommendations, kind of at the very general sense, everybody was like, The Stand and It. And I was like, okay, but that's like what everybody recommends to everybody for Stephen King. And I'd like, for people that read King that know me, I don't think that those are going to be recommendations.
No. Don't get me wrong. I think you will love It. I'm actually more sure of any of the things we've talked about that you will love It, with a giant caveat. Okay. Which is that scene that everybody talks about, I think is also going to be a problem for you. The thing is that that's a problem for everyone. Like, everyone who loves It is like, we hate this scene. Right. But we just love the other things about it in spite of it. And I think I have never, in any book anywhere, read a better group of friends than the Losers Club in It. Number one. it's never been matched. Each of those losers, I say that affectionately, that's what they call themselves. Each of those kids is a different type of individual that they bring out the best of each other. They're all realistic. I feel like everybody can find a version of one of these kids that fits with them. Truly excellent. And then you also get like their adult selves and like how the adults were like reminiscing on them as kids. You will love it. The only reason I don't recommend it as the first step is because it's horror. So I want you to not start with horror. 2, it is like 1,000 pages. And 3, there are things in it that are very disturbing. So I would not want to start you on the really disturbing ones, but I think you will love that book when you eventually give it a try.
Well, and like, you know, reading a lot of fantasy stuff, obviously Children in Peril in general does not, like in fantasy, I'm not going to put a book down because of that. Right. Part of the reason for that is because it's in a secondary world. So one of the issues I have with horror is you don't have that psychic barrier anymore because it's right outside on the street, right? And that's the thing that like has really made me hesitate with it. A, because it's not in a secondary world, and B, I have kids. So like, and I already am like a mama bear and don't trust people around my kids. So, I mean, loosely, you guys know what I mean. But like, that's one of the reasons why I've always kind of like,
for sure,
pulled away from it.
I can't imagine like being a parent and reading it and how that would affect it. And that would be individual even within groups of parents.
For sure.
But
for sure.
I think because you are from the perspective of the kids, what is more likely to happen is that you're going to relate to your childhood. Like, I don't think you're going to take off the mom brain. Yeah. Like, that's still going to be there. But, like, you know, you're experiencing this.
I'm going to get very mama bear protective of the kids in the story.
Absolutely.
I can guarantee you that right now.
As you should, because they're all wonderful. They're great kids. And if anybody, me, yourself, any other person you talk to, does convince you to read it, and it's something that you want to try in a reasonable time frame, I would read it before 11/22/63.
Okay.
Like if you decide that you're going to do that, you know, within the next like 2 years or something like that.
Oh, for sure.
There's a tie to 11/22/63 that just like, again,
I've heard about that actually.
It's one of those things where it's nothing if you just read 11/22/63 and you just won't even register to you. But if you read it, you're going to be so filled with just like joy. So that's what I think. Also, Derry, out of curiosity, which one are you saying is full of nightmare fuel? Doomakey or
it? I think, yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, Doomakey scared the hell out of me, but it's 2 specific scenes in Doomakey that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited to try it. I am like, Laura actually sent me, I'm really expanding this year, you guys. So I'm reading a couple Stephen King novels. And then Laura actually sent me a couple of contemporary romance novels. Wow. She's like, just try them. And I'm like, okay.
It's the year of the evolution of Tori.
It's, you know, I will be very surprised. I anticipate liking Stephen King books a lot more than I anticipate becoming a contemporary romance reader. But, you know, yes, Sal, Emily Henry. I've got Funny Story and Something Places.
I read Book Lovers.
Okay.
It was fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to read the new one. Is that Funny Story?
I think so.
I have it on the reason I read it, Book Lovers, is because my argument is you should, like, there's always people that are like, I can't deal with sci-fi. Like, ships, like, no. And then you ask them what they've read, and they've just never touched it.
Exactly,
exactly. And I'm like, if you've read something and you decide you don't like
Happy
or
place,
watched it or whatever, then good. Like, that's just finding your taste. But just, like, prejudging stuff. Yes. So I read every genre. And so, like, I don't read romance. And I'm like, my argument has always been, I get a lot of romance in other books, so I understand what I do and don't like about romance. But nevertheless, people bring up that I have never read romance. And I was like, okay, I'll read a romance. So, and it was fine. So I was like, okay, I'll occasionally sprinkle in a romance book.
That's the thing is, like, I continue, like, even as I've been doing in fantasy, where I've been expanding the type of fantasy that I read and appreciate pretty widely this last few years, I want to at least try. Like, I don't anticipate, you know, ever becoming a thriller or horror reader on the level that I am with fantasy, and I don't anticipate becoming a fan of romance. I'm not like closed-minded to it. Like, I'm going to go into it like, hey, I could enjoy this book. Who knows? But I want to be able to dabble in it enough that I can have conversations with my friends that really enjoy Stephen King and friends that, you know, because I have so many friends that read Stephen King, and every time they start talking about stuff, I'm like, I've seen The Green Mile. And that's it.
It's also a great book.
I really do. The only reason that one's not on my list yet, because I loved the movie. I thought it was really, really good. The only reason it's not on my list is because I already know the story. So I will probably read it at some point, but I didn't want it to be like, now I'm going to try reading Stephen King.
For sure.
You know,
I mean, I didn't give it to you as a first recommendation because I actually really like pulling out Green Mile in a specific case where people have read like 2 Stephen King books and they're like, you know, he's just not for me. And I'm like,
try that
one.
Heard
about Green Mile. Like it's almost like a trump card because like not liking Green Mile just means that like you're soulless. Like but
right, exactly.
As a first try, it's actually not good because it's so not like his other books.
Right.
That like it's not going to tell you if you like his other stuff.
I have not seen Shawshank Redemption, Derry.
Oh my God, Derry. Well, read the novella first and then watch the movie because the movie is better than the novella, but the novella is really good.
Yeah. Is it like super high level suspense?
Shawshank Redemption? No. It's about a prison.
I know very little about it because I live under a rock.
No, it is. So. Any story inherently has like regular suspense, but like it's really about this guy goes to jail and he says he's innocent, and he maintains he's innocent, and he meets Red, who is the narrator of the story and who's played by Morgan Freeman in the movie.
Love it.
And he becomes, friends with Red, and it's just their life for 30 years or however long in the prison. And anything else than that is like getting deeper into why it's good. But I mean, like that's the premise. It's just their life in prison.
I'll read it.
It's really good. Yeah. Evie is soulless. Actually, so I would understand someone thinking that Shawshank Redemption is boring more than Green Mile, even though I think they're like doing similar-ish things. But the Green Mile is just way more emotional.
Sure.
Evie, have you watched Shawshank or just read the novella? Oh, I see right here. Yeah, so the novella is way drier than the movie. The movie is way more emotional, so maybe you'll like the movie better.
Sal and possibly Evie, but Sal, because I know she mentioned that earlier. I will probably start doing TBRs again, videos in the near future, because I've discovered that like I needed the break from them for a while, but now with my kind of read your shelves challenge, which I'm epically failing at, not epically failing, but I need to bring my new book buying back a little bit still, but I think doing TBRs again may help me with that so that I have like a specific, these are the books on my shelves that I'm going to read for the next month. I'm guessing I probably wouldn't read anything King until July or August is my guess at the earliest. And then I'll probably start one. Sal says having just sent me 2 books, which thank you, by the way.
I just got a bunch. So I graduated from university yesterday, which means that a bunch of people got gifts, which was very, very nice of them all.
Of course.
They finally learned the best thing to get me is book gift cards.
Absolutely.
So I got like 4 book gift cards, and I'm just like, oh man, I gotta buy some stuff.
Yep. Yeah. It was cute. I got a birthday gift card a week and a half ago from a family member, and they were like, gave me this Barnes and Noble gift card, and they were like, this is helpful, right? And I'm like, yes. I'm not gonna say no to a Barnes and Noble gift card.
Yeah, no, it's great. Especially because I don't buy new books very often. Like I either get an arc digitally, or it's a book that I've been anticipating for so long. So just be able to go in the store and just be like, I'll try this one. It's gonna be nice. Yeah,
it's gonna be great.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. It is nice to have been graduated finally, and on to the next step. Don't send me any romance books.
She just sent me one.
Sal, my Amazon wish list is like in the link of my videos, but I can send it to you if you want. But you don't have to send me anything. It's okay.
Sal just sent me Noble House by James Clavell, but also she sent me it's Soulless. Vampires, Werewolves, and Parasols. So I have no idea what I'm getting into, but hey.
Noble House. is narrated by Ralph Lister, and I'm very excited because the last two Clavel books were not narrated by James Lister or Ralph Lister, and I miss how good he was at Shogun. I know you're not a big audio person, but like it really, really helped me appreciate Shogun.
Yeah.
You didn't read Taipan, did you?
I have it now, but I have not read it yet. I'm
Taipan's
excited.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people that have read a lot of people, the tiny group of people that have actually read these in our community, have a lot of them have said that they like Taipan better.
I like Taipan better, but that is exclusively because of the audiobook. If I didn't have the audio, I actually bought a hardcover of Taipan because I had like a crappy mass market paperback, so I got rid of it.
Yeah.
And I was looking through the pages again, and the like pidgin English that they use is so frustrating to me. And then when we started Gaijin has much less of it, but sometimes there's some, and it just was like, I hate this. I hate this so much. And in audio, it doesn't bother me as much. So if you read Taipan and the pidgin English bothers you, give it a shot on audio.
The one I'm actually most excited about in the rest of the series is King Rat. I'm really excited because if I'm not mistaken, and I feel like I have to sneeze and it's been sitting there for like 5 minutes. I want to just double check. So I know that
I have just read Shogun and Taipan, and then I DNF'd Gaijin. And everybody's reviews of Gaijin does not inspire me to pick it back up, but I probably will someday. I didn't get rid of it. I just didn't want to read it at the time.
So King Rat is actually about a prisoner of war in a Japanese prison camp.
Yes.
And
that's more of like his pseudo memoir. Yeah.
Yeah. And that one I'm really excited to read after Shogun. Because I really loved Shogun.
Yeah. Yeah, you like Shogun a lot more than I did. Did you watch the show?
I haven't yet.
I like the show a lot more than the book. It's
nice.
It's one of those unicorn situations where I'm like, it got rid of the things I don't like about the book and did all the good things I like about the book.
Yeah.
And did some stuff better. Like, I mean, there's some scenes in the book that I wish were in the show. But
Sure.
It's usually funny stuff. Like the duck scene is not in the show. And I understand why. I understand why, but I'm like, that duck scene is pure comedy gold.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Ugh.
In general, the show is actually way more self-serious. There's much less humor. There's still error of translation humor, but it's so much less than I think the book is actually quite funny.
No, I do too. Yeah, I really liked it. It surprised me how much, because I have always loved anything to do with like, Japanese, Korean / Chinese history and all of that kind of stuff. So I was anticipating loving it, but I was surprised at how much I loved it.
When are you going to get to the Dandelion Dynasty, Tori? You're distracting me with Stephen King. I'm losing sight of the real goal.
The real goal. Honestly, I could see that being a series I tackle in 2025. It is quite possible.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to get through some other series first. And especially the thing that I didn't want to do is be like, I'm either going to have to wait till I'm done rereading Malazan or take a break from Malazan to read Dandelion, because I do not want to be reading both of those at the same time.
Yeah, I actually think that the series that that Dandelion is most similar to me is Malazan. Not in the ways that like the top level ways that people would think to describe them, but in the level of detail and like the non-orthodox storytelling and like the ways that all the minor characters like have their own rich inner lives and stuff. I think it's pretty similar in that way. Yeah. So lots of concentration for sure.
Yeah. I'm excited. Between you and Pete, I hear about Dandelion Dynasty quite frequently.
Yeah, we just got Ben on the train. Books with Genghis Khan. He's reading Wallstorms right now.
Nice.
Yeah, Dandelion is much easier. That's what like, I knew when I said that people were gonna immediately think difficulty level. But I just mean there's a lot of similarities in like the types of things that are going on in the series. Although also Malazan is way more high magic, like way more. So
yeah,
Pete was summoned. We summoned Pete.
He was here at the beginning and then he disappeared, and then I said Dandelion Dynasty and he came back. Yes, I do have the Last Herald Mage trilogy I was gifted it by my friend Casey for my birthday.
And what is that?
This is Mercedes Lackey, one of her Valdemar. From what I understand, and Derry, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know as much about Mercedes Lackey as I possibly should. But there's the Valdemar world has a whole bunch of different books written in it. So like different, kind of like Realm of the Elderlings has like a bunch of different specific, distinct sets. And this is the one that Casey said was her absolute favorite and that she wanted me to read. So this is 3 books in one. It's an omnibus. So it's going to take me like 5 minutes to read each one. But
yeah, I'll be looking forward to your review on that, because Mercedes Lackey is one of those authors that has a ton of books, so I don't know where to start.
Right.
And it's funny once you get, like, when I hadn't read Guy Gabriel Kay, I felt that so much. I was like, oh, man, I don't know where to start. He has so many books. And then now that I've read some, I'm like, guys, it doesn't really matter. Just pick up a book. But I don't apply that knowledge to Mercedes Lackey or anybody else. I'm just like, oh, I don't know where I should start. Because I don't want my first interaction with the author to be like the one everybody doesn't like or something, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, Casey hasn't steered me. She really liked Daughter of the Forest a lot. It's also one of her favorite books. And The Last Herald Mage, she said, was like absolutely where she wanted me to start. So awesome. I'll let you know.
Good. What are some other things coming up on your TBR, like in the next few months that like you would like to get to?
Dark Age.
Dark Age, of course, yeah.
I have begun my Terry Pratchett journey with Guards this year, and so Ben and I are taking a trip to Kentucky in June. Actually, we're leaving a week from today, and we will be probably listening to Men at Arms and Feet of Clay there and back. I'm very excited. I can't wait. Carrot is like one of my favorite characters in fantasy at this point after one book. So I'm excited for more of that. What else am I reading soonish? Once I finish the rest of the Red Rising books, I will probably pick up Sun Eater.
Nice.
So,
Tori will like Guy Gabriel Kay because Tori is smart. I think
I'll like some of Guy Gabriel Kay. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll like Tigana, but who
that's
cares?
the only one that was on my TBR for a long time.
That's because everybody's basic, and like they just go on. I like Tigana, but it's my least favorite of the books I've read from him. But they just like that's his most popular, so then people just only buy his most popular, so then it keeps perpetuating. But like you not liking Sarantine Mosaic is just a crazy man's dream. Like there's no way that you won't like Sarantine Mosaic.
Yeah.
And then like even like Lions of Alderson, I think
that's the one I'm going to start with.
Yeah, like I that screams a book that you will really like. I would be appalled if you didn't like it, or not appalled, but shocked, I guess.
Yeah, that's the one I'm going to start with because I've just kind of sat back and listened to all of the discourse around GGK this last year, and Lions is the one that I was like, yeah, I think we're going to start with that one.
Evie, how many stars did you give A Brightness Long Ago? And is it more than 4 stars? Because if so, you're not dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Evie DNF'd Sarantine Mosaic, and now she thinks that we're enemies, but we're not because she really liked the other Guy Gabriel Kay book that she read. So,
well, isn't that how it works? That if you don't like the same books and have the same opinions about them, then you're enemies.
Yeah, I have drones flying to Evie's house to just explode the whole, just death to her and her pets and everything. How dare she not like it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I thought that was a prerequisite for being on the internet.
Tigana's a weird one where like. I don't understand why it's his most popular. I think maybe it was just a time and a place thing where like it happened to come out at the time that book took off. But like there's so many of his books that do some of the same stuff as Tigana but better and also don't have weird sex scenes in them. Like I don't get it really.
That's coming up here.
Oh, listen. Guy Gabriel Kay has a reputation for being extremely horny. And that's what one of the reasons not true. Like,
it's just because of Tigana.
It is literally, I mean, like, okay, so it's because of Tigana, and then there's like one chapter in Lions where like it's almost thematic, where it's like all of the characters are doing something sex-based in that chapter. But like even within that chapter, like it fades to black for most of them. It's more just like talking about where they are in their lives and stuff like that. And like it feels very intentional in that book. And then most of his other books, it just fades to black, or it's like it'll be talking about the emotions the characters feeling in the scene and not getting like graphic. And then Tigana is just like, let's have a 5-page sex scene on a hill. And I'm like, what? So it's very different. So I don't know why that's
See, it's funny because like I don't actually hate spice in my books. I really don't. But the kind of like just content in general, it's not the what, it's the how. That I'm like, if it's just like super gratuitous and like I just like,
don't read the Ghana.
Shogun is an incredible book and I love it to bits and pieces, and also chapter 40 can be removed.
You keep saying that, and I don't remember what chapter 40 is, so I'm just glad that
that's
I don't
okay.
know.
There are, in fairness to chapter 40, there are some very funny like dialogue bits that happen around that, but yeah, when we did our read through of it, and it was Alex and Joanna, right? Yeah, Alex and Joanna and Alan and I in our Discord chat for it. And it was like dominoes because I think Alex got to it first and he was like, so chapter 40. And then like all of us were kind of like catching up. And then Joanna, I think I was there next and I was like, okay, chapter 40 happened. And then Joanna was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And since she finally got there, and then Alan, I think, got there last. And it was so funny because he came into the chat and he was like, okay, guys, I really don't remember that being in there at all. Like, I'm sorry I didn't warn you.
I may need to go like sample chapter 40 again and remember what the hell you're talking about. Because if all of you were like, what the hell? I'm like, I had to have read it and been like, what the hell? But I don't remember. Maybe I just was like, nope, it's out of there.
Evie, I adore you, but I am neither of those things. I appreciate you, but I'm neither of those things.
Yeah, I just think it's a taste thing, and
sure.
Again, like not even taste and like you said, like I don't mind.
No, I don't either.
Book, but when it's there, just to be like, you know, what's good, ass and titties, then I'm like, all right, could be, maybe not
exactly.
And that's I think the difference is that a lot of times Guy Gavriel Kay, like if he's including a sex scene, it's to tell you about like why this character feels this way about this person. And it's like kind of beautiful. And then it's not like talking about their bodies. It's just talking about their reception. And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should read some Guy Gavriel Kay.
I didn't know if you were teasing or not, Evie. So I wasn't assuming anything. I was just responding to the comment.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be nuanced on the internet at all, by the way.
Not. Yeah, absolutely, Derry.
Yeah, exactly, Derry. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. But we're going to wrap up here. We've been going for 2 hours here. And I want to thank Tori for coming on and having a great chat with me.
That's fun.
Talking to me about Stephen King and all the things that she knows that I
knew
go off about. And chat, as always, thank you. You guys were awesome today, as always. And Tori, if there's anything, last remarks or anything you want to say to lead us off?
I don't think so.
Okay. Go check out Tori if you haven't. She's
my books are on Amazon. I'm supposed to say that.
Yeah, that's actually what I was expecting you to say.
This is my friends always make so much fun of me in the comments because I'm horrible. I'm horrible at remembering to promote myself. My books are on Amazon. Phased is a YA dark paranormal told from the perspective of written by someone who absolutely hated Twilight. And The Bloodstones is a dark epic fantasy that is partially Eastern inspired. Military fantasy, politics, etc. So
awesome. And I'm looking forward to checking those out and giving them 1 star.
Yeah, I would look forward to your 1-star review.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye, guys.